Welcome back. It's Morning Express here on KTN, and we're just about to talk about cybercrime, cybersecurity, and just how much we're falling victim to all of
timely
this.
conversation.
Yes, very, very timely. And in studio, we have Evans Kahuthu, who is the project manager, information security at the ICT Authority. Good morning.
Morning.
Welcome to Morning Express.
Thank you.
Hey, Busana. So, my first question, as everyone would want to know, have we finally regained control of KDF's Twitter account and their spokesman, Emmanuel Chichi's Twitter account?
I think that's still a work in progress, and Twitter is actually actively helping, because the only people who can help is Twitter themselves.
So we haven't found out who exactly was behind this cyber attack?
I think it's not so much finding out who is behind it, but at least to regain control in the first instance, yeah.
Okay. And what we're seeing in the country is that we are getting more and more prone to cybercrime, and I don't know if there are any reasons specifically behind this. Is it that we have very weak passwords? Do we have careless admins for certain accounts or websites? What exactly is the problem?
I think the problem is not unique to Kenya. This is a global trend. Unfortunately, we actually have now four submarine international cables, which are bringing internet connectivity into Kenya, which actually means now that we are actually part of the global community. So what we are experiencing is very good speeds and connectivity, and the hackers have seen a new market where they can actually leverage their trade. In fact, one of the things that came out early July was one of the first cybersecurity white papers from Japan. And Japan was actually saying that they reported 5 million cases of cybercrime just in 1 year. This was an increase from 1 million the year before. In fact, for them, they're so worried to the point where the Prime Minister is actually suggesting that they're going to form a cybersecurity strategy next year, which will be responsible to the cabinet. So again, this is something that is going on around the world, and Kenya is going to be actually affected also. And these are the consequences of now becoming well connected.
Evans, shouldn't have we, control this? If we're going to talk about how to digitize government, e-government, then if we are going to tell people that everything you need is going to be just a click away or not, should it have been just the first step for us to figure out that to first get competent people who know how to first control the information and things that we have before we get to scale it up to the next level?
Totally agree. In fact, this is one of the reasons why, back in June 24th, the president launched what is referred to as the National Cybersecurity Framework. So in other words, we're moving from the ad hoc approach to security to now a more systematic, strategic way of responding to cybersecurity. So as we digitize, we know what are the consequences of digitizing. So in that case, we are actually doing work in the back end to ensure that we actually secure this information as we move forward. So these are already efforts which are in place. So we'll be seeing more of this coming up. Yeah.
And just to follow up that, who's in charge of government ministries and the websites?
That actually falls squarely under the ICT Authority. Yeah.
So what happens? I mean, say whatever authority, can I just hire someone to make a website for me? Where is it hosted?
Yeah. In fact, in the past, and this was actually the reason why ICT Authority was formed. In the past, you had disjointed government units which were doing whatever they felt like, or actually they were doing what they were supposed to do. Now, when the Jubilee government came into play, the president, through a presidential executive order, formed the ICT Authority. And this was to make sure they streamline and coordinate ICT deployment within government. And the whole idea is, like now what you're mentioning, the websites, there are no standards. People just do whatever they feel like. And that lack of standard is actually very bad from a security point of view. So one of the goals for ICT Authority is to come up with a strategy which will actually come up with the standards which will be followed for creating websites and hosting. Because the biggest problem that we are experiencing is the websites. Around the world, 80% of attacks are actually websites. Reason being, you need them access to the public. And the minute you open anything to the public, you're welcoming good and bad traffic. Yeah.
Well, when you look at where these attackers basically find interest, it's and if they're dealing with governments, it's normally about the business trade secrets, about security secrets, and if this happened on Twitter accounts and on a website, what are we yet to see if we don't do something as fast as possible? We could see a lot of secrets that are outed by these cyber criminals. So, are there any measures that are put in place, especially when giving, if there are any tenders whatsoever to the website developers? Are there any specific rules and regulations that they have to follow? For instance, after designing the website, do they give the hosting rights to the ICT authority?
Now, the biggest challenge, and this is again a global trend in information security, it's not the technology and it's not the standards or the policies. Those actually are very easy to implement. However, what we are finding over and over again is the people aspect. You can have the best system, the best technology, but if you have the wrong people, it's a big problem. Case in point, look at the former CIA contractor, Edward Snowden. You can bet $1 million that CIA had the best security implemented in the system, but all it took is for Snowden to open his mouth and everything leaked out. The same happened to WikiLeaks. The information that you're reading on WikiLeaks is actually coming from insiders, guys sending out the information. So you can configure your system the best way, but if an insider is actually rogue, they can actually send the configuration to somebody out there. So I think what we need to concentrate on is actually the capacity and the people who can be trusted so that they can manage these systems, because that is actually where the biggest weakest link is, because this goes across government and the private sector. It is a very scary problem. Yeah.
And what about the security lapses that we are seeing increasingly? And I know that this is a global trend, but when you look at Kenya, how are you dealing with security lapses? How are you dealing with, for instance, exposure to malware infections?
Okay. Now, I'm glad you asked that question, because one of the biggest propagators for malware is pirated software. And this is actually a cultural problem, because we tend to like free stuff. In fact, if you look at the free DVDs that we have on the streets, people like those free DVDs. But unfortunately, the culture transcends even to software. So we end up getting pirated software. What you need to understand is that some of these mafias have now moved from the traditional crime of kidnapping guys and whatever. Now they have trained guys who they actually are specialized in crafting malware, which they install in some of this pirated software. And what they do, they sell this software or they give it for free out there, because all they are looking for is avenues for propagating the malware. And Kenya is actually becoming a victim because we have a lot of illegal software. So I think, first of all, we need to worry about piracy and illegal software, because if we don't crack that nut, we're going nowhere. Yeah.
But we have a pool of not only intelligent, but a serious pool of young people who are very well versed with technology. They build softwares. They're coming up with apps every single day. And we have all these hubs coming, every place. Why are we not using this talent and pool to create things that are Kenyan? Because couple that with what is our culture, what we like. Why are we not using this talent of pool to bring them, into on board and have them create things that we can use?
In fact, that's the thinking. In fact, what we've been trying to do is to build capacity around information security. We have very good developers. That's actually no question. But what we are now trying to do is to ensure that in their system development lifecycle, they now move into what we call secure system development lifecycle. And then these are the guys now who you will actually be able to put in the industry to produce some of this software. But again, this is actually the thinking that we're moving towards.
Yeah. Question. In the US and UK, every year, they look for their biggest hackers, around, they provide many avenues, competitions and whatnot to find them. Who were our biggest hackers in Kenya?
Actually, we had the biggest hacking conference early this year, the Africa Hackon.
Yes.
And the who is who in the industry in terms of information security was there. So I guess those are the guys we have, at least the public ones. You see, the biggest problem when it comes to information security is the ethics part, because the line between ethical and unethical is actually the question.
Yes.
So the guys who showed up, they are some of the ones we consider white hat. At least that's what they proclaim to be. But those are the guys we know in the industry for now.
All right. When you talk about hackers, on the other side, you will also talk about the fact that some of them can go ahead and manipulate an entire government website, and they can do that for weeks. And if you don't have someone on top of the game, on top of the cybercrime or dealing with cybercrime game, then maybe these guys can go ahead and do it for a month. And who knows what kind of information they're going to be posting on our websites, or government websites in this case. So I just want to know, are there opportunities that are given, for instance, to younger ICT, how can I call them, ICT gurus, the younger ones that we are having or that we are grooming? Are there opportunities that are given to them at the ICT authority, at least, to take part in dealing with cybercrime?
If you read the National Cybersecurity Strategy, part of the goals is capacity building, and those opportunities is what we are aiming at, because again, the best are out there. We know government cannot do without them, so there's already efforts to try and use them to try and secure government and the public at large. So yes, there is. Yeah.
And, I don't know how far you've gotten into trying to build a standard for websites, one for government, not only government, ministries, county governments, and whatnot. Because in a standard, the Kenyan websites are something from a WordPress to something that is as complicated, as a Google page and whatnot. So, please.
And some of them look like blogs, actually.
Yeah. Actually, there is already a team which has been working on standards. One of the things that has been raised all along is that most websites look news-oriented. They're not service-oriented as they should be, and this is actually a concern, because users, they spend so much time trying to look for the information that they want in a website. Nevertheless, the standards are already in draft. In fact, I believe they should be published in the ICT Authority website in the next few months. And the whole idea is now we're going to have websites that meet government standards and which are service-oriented moving forward. Yeah.
In your mind, just explain to me, how does that kind of website look like? What do you have envisioning of, a government website? How should it look like? What should be the display? Could I open it on my phone? What is, some of the things that you're looking at?
In Kenya, mobile connectivity, we are at 76.9%. So if you are talking about inclusivity and reaching out people, everything has to be rendered in a browser on a mobile phone. So those websites, ideally, they are supposed to, actually they will be. The other thing we are looking at is when you visit a government website, you don't need to think about which website is this. It should at least give you an impression that you're in a government website. So we're talking about the emblem. We're talking about something to do with the ministry. And of course, the services should be actually the first thing that you land into. Yeah.
Because the first thing when you get to a government website today, you'll see a minister, speech, then it will be rolling minister speech, and there's a PS speech.
And then when you click on it, you don't see anything.
There's nothing. Yeah. It takes forever to load.
I know. Yeah.
Are we working on the speeds, loading onto websites? Because sometimes I think that these websites are not all inclusive. I've visited a number of government websites, and sometimes you actually look at them and you're thinking, okay, how come people with disabilities, for instance, are not taken care of? Because how come they cannot hear? For instance, if someone is visually impaired and they can't hear if they visit a website, then that website is not all inclusive.
Totally agree. And again, these are some of the challenges and the gaps which have been identified. In as far as speeds are concerned, it also depends on which provider you are on, maybe on your end. But from the back end, at least there's sufficient speeds which guarantee that the website will be downloaded or rendered on your browser at a very faster speed. So there are a lot of components when it comes to how fast a website loads, but again, the backend is sufficient enough.
Yeah. Let's talk about social media for a moment.
Yeah.
And since this government came in, we have had a plethora of Twitter accounts for every department. 2-3 Twitter accounts. This account tweets this, the next one retweets, the other one tweets the other one, and it's everywhere. In terms of disasters, you have no idea. For instance, Westgate, you have the Office of Inspector General, Interior Ministry, you have the KDF Twitter account, you have everyone and people trying. I believe government offices that have been employed trying to outdo each other on information. What is the policy on social media on how governments and different ministries should use the social media?
That falls squarely under communications, so it's not so much under security. However, one of the things that we are trying to address is the biggest issue with social media, and this goes for the top three: Twitter, Facebook, and Google. All these things are hosted by outsiders. They are third parties. So you don't have control. And what happens is that sometimes if you rely on them for you as your primary communication tool, you actually cannot guarantee its continuity in the future. And that's one of the issues that's coming up from a security point of view. And that falls under what we call availability. But again, that now is for communications people to agree or to decide how to move forward with it. Mm-hmm. But from a security point of view, it's all about, are you in control, and how available can you guarantee you as users?
Right.
Yeah.
Kenya happens to be, I think, in 4th place among Africa's top internet countries, according to a survey that was done in the second quarter of 2012. Yeah. Now, I would like to know from you, as the project manager of information security at the ICT Authority, what is being done to educate government personnel in regard to information security, in regard to cybercrime, in regard to social media platforms and how to deal with them? Because what we see on social media platforms, if you look at the tweets by some of the government officials, you'd actually be surprised that they can be tweeting certain information that maybe in one way or another you'd think probably this information doesn't need to be tweeted. So is there anything like a awareness sort of drive that is going on by the ICT Authority to help government personnel to learn how to deal with the internet, information security, cybercrime and stuff?
Yeah, we do have periodic workshops which are held for government employees. And again, what we are looking at is not just government. We are looking at even at the larger public. One of the biggest initiatives we've done, we've signed an MOU with the C4D lab at the University of Nairobi. And we are going to offer capacity building workshops. In fact, we've already done the first one. This was done in June. And what we are looking at is quarterly training for actually the county staff, because even the county is a big problem. Because as we roll out the counties, one of the things we're finding out is that we are actually increasing more of our internet coverage, but at the same time, we are creating more avenues for attacks. So we are looking at creating capacity both in management and at technical level. What I would say is this: the technical capacity is not a problem. That actually, if you get a technical person in a room for a week, you will actually achieve a lot, because technical people are more responsive to these issues. What we are lacking is management, and this again is across not just government, but even the private sector. If we can get management buy-in, I think the culture of cybersecurity can be inculcated in our society, and that can go a long way. Because even the way we operate, the way people do stuff is actually scary. And that's what we need to make sure that everybody is sensitized in as far as cybersecurity is concerned. And there's a correlation between awareness and reduction in crime. And that's what we are looking at.
Can we start with this digitizing in government with simple things like police stations, where you can find those P3 forms, downloadable, go to all these websites, things that actually usable, just not that are fancy things that, just speeches for, cabinet secretaries and whatnot. In fact, we don't care about the speeches,
yeah.
If you can say. Can we start with those usable things? I think possibly the public can get a buy-in into what you're trying to do.
Most definitely. And again, we are looking at digitization, which can be used with light technology, let's say on a mobile. Because you look at some far-fledged areas, they don't have connectivity. So you need to, when you're talking about digitizing, you need to actually consider them also, so that they can actually have the infrastructure to ride on the digitization you're talking about. But again, yes, I agree. Those simple digitization are actually what we are looking into.
Can you start this thing with KDF possibly?
No, actually the KDF is just the Twitter part. And again, the Twitter you have no control. In fact, I spoke to Major Chirchir, and besides the Twitter account, there was not a lot of damage. However, not to say that it was not bad, because from a security point of view, we are looking at reputation. And the person who hacked the Twitter account, he got his mileage, because hackers have different motivations. One of them is fame. The other one is financial, of course. So from a fame point of view, the media covered him, everybody knew about it, and he achieved what he wanted. Yeah.
Well, in case he wasn't going to be, aired out by the media, I think this was going to affect you even much more, because at this point in time, I think we actually played a role in helping you at least have the account returned back to to the KDF. But then, finally, I'd just like to know from you, in a country where ICT is growing at a very fast rate, are there laws maybe say cyber laws that people need to follow, and are there criminals who have been, say for instance, apprehended since cybercrime broke out in Kenya?
The law that we have is the Kenya Information Communication Act, which actually spells out crimes to do with abuse of computers. The CID department has actually had successful prosecutions. However, one of the issues that we're facing is also capacity in the prosecutor's office and the judiciary. But it's good to say that the prosecutor's office also realized that they have a gap in that area, and what they've done is that they've proceeded to form a cybercrime division, which is going to be strictly dealing with cybercrime prosecution, because again, there's a rise. Now, what we're looking at again is the judiciary. We need the judiciary also to actually have capacity in this area, so that now you complement the efforts of the CID, the prosecutors, and the judiciary to have successful prosecutions. Now, the biggest problem also we are having is evidence. A lot of our systems, the crime that is being done right now is by internal guys, unfortunately. And this again, if you look at international, 60% or more is mostly internal guys. The beauty about being an internal guy committing crime is that you can erase the evidence. And that's actually where the problem comes in. So we are having a lot of guys who are colluding with the internal guys, and this is actually very common in the financial sector. They commit the crime and then they erase the evidence. And so you have, as a prosecutor or investigator, you can't find evidence to go and pin them down. But we've also seen effort where now there's enough technology which is being implemented by these institutions to make sure that they can actually be able to preserve this evidence. In as much as you try to alter it, it can be recovered and it can be used for prosecution. And this, we are hoping, will actually help deter cybercrime. Nevertheless, this thing is here to stay. In fact, what you're talking about, the Twitter and the few hacking, those things are just but the beginning, because this connectivity that we have is so good to the point where, since we are part of the global village, we're now part of the bigger attack. So these attacks are going to be on the rise, guaranteed. So what I can say is this: the efforts, the partnership between private sector and government is needed now. In fact, cybercrime or cyber security is one of the areas where you cannot wish to part with the private sector, because unfortunately, you will need these guys to slow down or to get evidence on cybercrime. All the telecommunication infrastructure, most of it is owned by the private sector. So if you need to make mileage in this area, you must cooperate with the private sector. Yeah.
Evans Kahuthu, thank you very much. You have a Twitter handle?
I try not to tweet.
Why not?
You know, the problem of being in security, you end up being also paranoid in a way. So I try even...
so you don't have a Twitter handle?
I don't even try to tell people where I am.
And you don't feel left out?
No, actually I read other people's Twitter. That's the problem.
Oh.
Yeah. I think the hacker was watching, and please go and figure out his Twitter handle. Please, if you can, hack.
If he's Kenyan. You know, someone was joking and said, you know, this hacker might be from Gaza. But thank you so much for passing by.
Thank you.
All right, you're watching Morning Express. We'll now take a break, and the newsroom is coming up. That's an interesting one. I'm sure cybercrime is also not going to be left out. I can't wait to hear what they have to say about how a social media account could be hacked.